I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fights o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, see, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? You can be seated if you'd like. I'm going to lead us in a few verses here of Amazing Grace and then go into Freedom's Cry, which is in Freedom's Cry.
This is live.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I am found, was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. A precious deed that grace appear, the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. The Lord has promised good to me. His word my hope secures. He will my shield and portion be, as long as life endures. Yea, when this flesh and heart shall fail, and mortal life shall cease, I shall possess with thee like to join in, your words are at the bottom. Are you going to agree? Our freedoms are waning and we'll lose our liberty. Slipping one by one until there's nothing left to see. Are you willing to stand by me? Are you just going to let it be? The ranchers are first, but brother, next it may be me. We'll all stand together or we'll hang separately. Are you going to the tree? Are you willing to be free? It won't get any easier to regain lost liberty. Strange things are happening in this land that once was free. So, brother, I ask you, are you going to stand by me?
Okay, I want to thank everyone for coming out this afternoon. I'm not very great at public speaking, I'm not going to lie. And coming right before Gavin, and it's really bad here. So I will give Gavin the microphone so that I don't make you guys suffer through me speaking. And we'll listen to him educate us. Did everyone get the handouts on the table when you first came in? If not, I can bring them around to you.
Thank you for organizing.
That was 30 seconds. That passes each day 2,880 times. And each day, 2,880 times of that awkward silence goes by for every single prisoner that our justice system has locked away. Not just patriots, but many of them from Oregon. People like Ammon Bundy and Pete Santilli, Ryan Bundy, Cliven Bundy. But far beyond, people like Schaefer Cox from Alaska, Jeff Winehouse from the Midwest, and people that don't even necessarily identify themselves as patriots, but who either stood up for something or committed a minor human indiscretion and were locked away by a government who daily commits atrocities and murders against the people of these United States that are no longer united. So, your government here is poisoning your water, but our government is poisoning far more than that. It's the tip of the iceberg in corruption that in many ways may be centered in this community just like it's centered in Oregon. But they're not just poisoning our essentials. They're poisoning our minds, brother against brother and faction against faction and party against party, and keeping everyone divided, one against another, black against white and patriots against other groups, so that they can keep us fighting with each other instead of standing up for the rule of law. Now, the patriots in Oregon, and Lavoy Finicum, and Ammon Bundy, and John Ritzheimer, and all the others, they went down to Oregon to love their neighbor. They said, well, we can sit around and bicker, and we can have our board meetings, and we can have our party meetings, or we can go do something. We can go uphold the Constitution and honor the oath that our government and our officials and our police are not honoring, that our sheriffs are not honoring. We can go do what they said they would. I can't think of a veteran that I admire more than Lavoy Finicum. And it has nothing to do with whether he signed up for the military. He's a veteran of these United States and of liberty. And I don't honor faction or patch or uniform. Those things don't matter. Your party doesn't matter. Your faction doesn't matter. Your principle and your action is everything. And so our patriots in Oregon have action, but there's an even bigger message that has to have national ramifications as we try to bring justice for Lavoy and as we try to get our patriots out of jail. And that's why myself and my family, there's my wife Sandra back there and our 4 kids, we loaded up the RV and hit the road, hoping to find some answers and to light some brush fires of liberty across this nation. And so we left Washington, I don't know, about 3 weeks ago, and I hope we'll be home sometime this summer. But the message is simple. And we're going to cover that in 3 points today as we look at a few things, and I'm going to try and keep it simple, because the problem we have is that we often say, well, I'm a patriot group, and there's a group over there, and they do their thing, and I do my thing. And as patriots, sometimes we get hung up on this or that, and so we want to talk to people about it, and so we go to YouTube or the internet, and we make 3-mile-long posts and 3-hour-long videos, and we don't simplify the message of law and liberty, and we don't unite with our neighbor as much as we could, because we get distracted by the things that we're the most passionate about, which is human nature. But we're going to talk today first about repentance, just for a few minutes, and what got our country where we are. Then we're going to talk about real law. We're going to talk about learning the Constitution, but we're going to be going beyond the Constitution, because I don't need the Constitution for my rights. And then we're going to talk about action. And perhaps action is no more appropriate than in a community like this one, that's also, much like Oregon, the center of controversy around this nation. What I'm going to do first is what I always do, and you can join me or you cannot. I won't be offended one way or the other, but I put my faith in Christ, and I'm going to start with a prayer. God of the universe, I come before you, and we come and we ask that you give us wisdom. We ask that you will give us solutions. We are battered and worn down, and our flag and our liberties are tattered. This nation is filled with blindness and with hypocrisy and with hate, and we wade in innocent blood from the unborn to the aged. Father, we ask for forgiveness. We ask that you'll open people's eyes, that you'll give us courage again so that we can stand up and love our neighbor as ourselves and restore a piece of liberty in this land that you gave us so that our children cannot be slaves. In Jesus' name, amen. Yeah, let me make sure. I want to make sure everybody can hear good, so maybe see how we're... Is everybody... There we go. Everybody hearing okay? All right. So in the tone of the 3 points that I just talked about, because in keeping things simple, if we keep it to 3s, we often can educate and spread the word more. The first thing I want to talk about is what got our country here. Because as patriots or as activists or whatever we call ourselves, we're really good at pointing the finger at other people. We say, oh, look, it's Obama. Look, it's the Muslims. Look, it's Mexicans at the border, or it's Black Lives Matter. But the problem is us. The problem is America is filled with apathy and sin and cowardice. We've cast aside righteousness, we've cast aside God, And what I'm here to tell you is not, well, you need to believe exactly like I do, or you need to go to church with me. That's not the issue. The issue is a nation of liberty has to be founded on the principles, the moral principles of liberty, or you cannot have liberty. You cannot cast out the author of liberty and expect to have liberty. You cannot say, well, we should have separation of church and state, so therefore we should have leaders and politicians that have no principle and have no values and have no morals. You can't sit at home in front of games and TV and beer and Cheetos and PlayStations and fix a nation. It takes effort from every single one of us. And so we always look to people. We want heroes. Throughout history, people want heroes. And throughout history, our stories and our lore tells of heroes. And so America, here we're coming into election season, and America's looking for a savior, any savior except the real one. They look for it in Trump or in Ted Cruz. They look for it in Bernie Sanders or God forbid, Hillary Clinton. But the point is that all of these men, and this is the thing, is we say, well, we got to do this because at least it will get better. It's the best we can get. And for decades, we've been compromising and saying it's the best we can get. Let's just vote for that. And I say, well, what about principle? See, I don't vote anymore if I have to compromise my principle. And so people say, well, if you don't vote for our person, who can win? It's as bad as casting a vote for Hitler. And I looked them straight in the eye and I said, you're a liar. You don't tell me that I compromise your principle because you have compromised yours. And we keep doing this over and over again. We elect sheriffs and politicians and commissioners and city councilmen and congressmen and presidents, and they get up there and they tickle our ears. Some of them do it with appealing to the religious right, and some of them do it by appealing to people that are downtrodden and abused, and some of them do it by appealing to our hate for people across the sea or our fellow man or down at the border. But all of these men have one thing in common. None of them stand with us. I stand up here and I will say clearly, our government is a government of murderers. Our judges are murderers. Our justice system is murderers. And that's why Lavoy Finicum is dead. But not just Lavoy. In the same month that Lavoy was killed, our police killed about 150 more on the side of the road and on the streets of this nation. Now that's not law. We don't hire executioners to protect us. Except in this nation, we do. But they're not protecting us. They're turning our children into slaves. But all of this is happening because of us. We always want to pass the buck off to someone else. I'll vote for this person, and he'll fix it because he said he will, and then I'll just be angry and complain when he doesn't. Unprincipled men don't bring principle to your nation. I just said that Lavoy Finicum was murdered. He was assassinated, and I just called our government a government of murderers. It wasn't that hard, was it? It's pretty clear. Not one of our presidential slate has even mentioned it. So don't pretend with me that any of these men are patriots, that any of these men support liberty. Let us stop grasping at their words, looking for some little thing they say that we can construe as being on their side. It's not hard to be on the side of liberty. The government of Flint is corrupt. Our government that murdered Lavoy is corrupt. Our justice system, our county courts, our state courts, our federal courts is corrupted. We wade in innocent blood from the unborn to the aged, and then we look to a man without principle who has never stood with us and stands up on a podium now and says, I'll be there for you guys. And we say, rah, 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 and they in no way stand with us. And the fault is ours. Because we refuse to repent, we refuse to honor God, we consistently go the way of cowards because it hurts, and it is dangerous, and it is scary to stand up. And I feel that too. It's terrifying. It's terrifying for my children and for my family. I drove down the highway today, towing my trailer, driving down the road with my family with knots in my stomach because I had a sense, I didn't sleep well last night. I could feel the oppression in this region in a way that is different in different towns, and I could sense that things were wrong. And then I woke up this morning and sat down, and the news was talking about in Flint, 2 of the people who are suing the government for the water were just found murdered. See, the lawlessness is everywhere. The corruption and the evil. And some nights I feel it on the air, and I'm sure you do too. It's like it crackles. And it's terrifying. But courage is not being afraid. Courage is being afraid and being willing to step up anyway. And courage comes in people that seek righteousness, that seek God, that have principle. We have a nation where courage is beaten out of us, especially the men. Our system and our education system, it's not just the men, but they work particularly hard to make sure that any of us men, by the time that we're 30, we have the fight whipped out of us. It starts in school, it goes through college. If we try to push it, we get arrested, we get felony charges for the smallest of human infractions. Because we're expected by the time that we get to the middle age that we will fall into line and be the good, willing slaves and raise more slaves. And we will tell others, you need to comply so that we can satisfy our own guilt for doing so ourselves. Compliance isn't law. The government isn't law. Law doesn't change. Law is our liberty. Law is upheld. It has a foundation. I'm appalled when I travel this nation. I'm appalled by the cowardice of our men. And it means a lot that you guys showed up here today. It's always a small group. It's always a few people that are willing to get off their couch and show up. And so it shows how much more engaged you are than most of our nation. Our system is set up to neuter men so much that our education systems might as well just be castration stalls. Because that's what we're getting out. And we satisfy the people, not just the men, everybody, but it's entertainment, it's games, it's TV. Isn't it ironic that in this nation, some of the most popular films and television shows are about revolution and standing up to corruption? Like I've never seen in my lifetime, because they're living through other people. Everyone knows it's here, but it's easier to watch people bleed and die and suffer and stand up for what is right on a screen than to have to do it yourself. See, we're standing in the middle of a bullet point in history right now, and people are making choices from Washington to New York and Oregon and Michigan. People are making choices that will define what side of history they stand on, whether they will be the villain or the hero, the tyrant or the coward. And so for my part, I say we need to repent. We need to cast aside our apathy and our sin and our laziness. We need to start loving our neighbor as ourselves. And so we just covered part 1. Now, if we went to most of America's churches, they would spend 2 hours dancing around that subject in order to say nothing, because we're more concerned in this nation with filling chairs and donation coffers than we are with teaching the truth. And so that's why I get small groups. But give me 10 principled men for liberty than 1,000 cowards who with bravado wave their flag and say patriotism. And so I don't think I need to explain the story of Lavoy Finicum. We all saw it. I think we all know what's going on in Oregon.
Does the FBI left Oregon? No.
The FBI never leaves anywhere. They're always lurking around the corners. I don't let cars follow me for good reason. And so assume that they're everywhere. And let's talk about that as we go into talking about law in part 2. I want to talk about real law, because here we have this Constitution, and you can see I value it. It's a little tattered and worn. But this Constitution gives me nothing. If it went away today, my rights would not change an iota. And so we have a nation, and we say, well, we have constitutional rights, and our politicians say we're the greatest democracy in the world. And I say, this Constitution represents this republic. End of story. And this here is the law for federal government. Hard stop. That's all. And so they go on and they say, well, I'm a constitutional. I'm going to fix things for you guys. And we cheer them and we vote for them. And they go and they pass bills this high without even reading them. And we get angry, and so they placate us with a few political slippery words, and we forget, and we move on, and we vote for them the next season because it's the best that we can get. And we have unprincipled men in government who have no part with law. And so here we have our right to speech, and our right to travel, our right to arms, our right to life, liberty, and property. I'm testing our nerves. And so we have these rights in our Constitution, not granted by it, but affirmed by it. Because the Constitution is not a law for you and me. Not our state constitution, not our federal constitution. It is an absolute command for government that says you will not touch this liberty. And if you do, you are a criminal. But the founding fathers of this nation, they didn't invent that concept. And perhaps on the constitutional history, Chris Ann Hall, who many of you have heard of and many of you have probably listened to, is a better presenter on that than me. But our Constitution was plagiarized, if you will, in a positive sense, from 1,100 years of other documents that came before it. The concepts were not new, but the principle of a government by the consent of the governed applied the way we did was new and radical and fresh. And for a few years we had it, but so quickly we let it slip away and slip away and slip away. And it's just been more and more ever since those initial days when George Washington said, "No, I will not be a king." And gradually we went from a republic to where we stand now, which is a nation governed by puppets and ruled by a few kings in black robes. And ruled by money and by power and the people behind it. And so we sit around and we talk about law and the Constitution. We say, well, I have my rights. And then some people say, well, what if the Second Amendment goes away? Then what will we do? And I used to worry about that. And now I don't worry about that because the Second Amendment doesn't give me anything. Our Constitution is not in effect. It is in tatters. It's still law, but the government fully and completely ignores it. And if you don't believe me, try going and carrying a gun that the government doesn't approve of, especially the federal government. You'll be locked away in a federal penitentiary, perhaps for the rest of your life, even though you never even drew a gun, pointed it at anyone, threatened anyone, even though you didn't defend yourself when your government attacked you. See, we made the argument initially, and we tried to immediately push that back, many of us, but the argument was, did Lavoie go for a gun? And so we said, no, he didn't. And that was borne out in the later videos that were released. But the bigger point, and government's smart this way, they use their media horrors to sell the narrative they want, and we have to start controlling the conversation. The bigger point in law is not, did Lavoie go for a gun? It's that he had every right to. Had he come out guns blazing, he would have been the lawkeeper in that instance. He chose instead to sacrifice himself for his friends. And so, with perhaps the most grace that any of us have ever seen, a man was murdered by their government. But let's make no mistake, this is happening to people all over the nation. Our police kill 2 to 3 a day now across this nation. And we say, well, they have a right to defend themselves, and they do, but most of these have nothing to do with defense. These are executions, and oftentimes it is against people who may have committed small crimes, but their real crime is resisting an authoritarian, lawless government. And so while we think about law and we say, well, the problem is ISIS, they're going to destroy us all. But I'm not afraid of ISIS. ISIS is not our problem. The Muslims aren't our problem. The truth is, most of them are just trying to survive like the rest of us. But as patriots, I see this rabid hatred on Facebook patriot groups as if anyone, and our politicians even parrot this, let's just bomb them to glass. I cannot think anything further from America and liberty than the prattle and the foolishness coming from these wicked men that call themselves leaders and patriots. Law is to love your neighbor as yourself. That's it. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to tolerate Sharia law on my block for a moment, because it's lawless as well. But that's not what we face here now. See, we're distracted and we're divided, one faction against another, one race against another, one religion against another, because when they keep us divided, we will not turn and look at them. And so we fight with each other. But here's the difference. If me or you, if ISIS comes down our block and tries to enforce their lawlessness on us, no one will fault us for defending ourselves. If your local police department and your sheriff does, you will be shot in the head and put in a box for defending yourself. And they will call you the terrorist. Our government in these United States that are no longer united is the terrorists. They are the greatest terrorists in the entire world. We go across the globe killing innocents with impunity and without accountability. And now it's come right back here at home, and they're doing it to us when we dissent and when we speak out and when we stand up. And our sheriffs and our police and our government officials and our bureaucrats are right there with them. Some of them aren't okay with it, but that doesn't make them good cops. Because if I hire you to be my bodyguard and someone attacks me and you do nothing, you may not be a murderer, but you're not a good bodyguard. And so it's very simple. You're not a good cop because you don't kick me in the head on the side of the road. You're a bad cop if you don't stop those who do. Our police are not with us. Our government is not with us. And it has nothing to do with hating police or government. It has to do with hating injustice and loving law. And so law, we talk about our law in the Constitution and the 10 Amendments, and we get to some of those later amendments and we kind of started screwing things up and violating law in some of them. And yet the Constitution is arguably still the best legal document we've ever made for government, even though it has some flaws. But it is in no fashion in effect. Look no further than Oregon. Even people like Ammon Bundy with very intelligent lawyers who control the conversation and who know the ways of the courts, they can't even keep up. The rules are changed moment by moment to suit a lawless government. The Constitution has no effect in our courtrooms. And if you don't believe me, go into your local courtroom. Watch them parade one hapless man in front of another who has harmed no one but offended the state. Watch them destroy lives and tear apart families and take away children and lock away people for nothing. See, at the head of this nation of terror in our terrorist government, the greatest terrorists in this entire world are not ISIS. It's our judges. Our judges are the terrorists, and they have perfected terrorism. Why would they do foolish things like cut off heads on video when they can prance in flowing robes and stand behind mahogany thrones and have people praise them and honor them and say, look how polite and professional and just we are? These men in our government have perfected terrorism. And as we wander around this nation every day with the shackle of a slave on our ankle, passing it down to our children, they convince the people they are free by giving them toys and flags and little sayings to repeat. But law does not change. And so let's talk about that. Let's make sure we all understand law here before we leave today. Because if people understood law, everything would change. We say, well, our legislature, they just passed this law. Make sure the mic's attached to me and not to the jacket. So our legislature just passed the law, they say. What are we going to do now? Our Congress passed this law, we say. We have to take it to the courts, which of course are equally lawless and will naturally uphold the law. Our city council passed a law. We have to mow our lawn every week or we'll be fined. And if we don't pay the fine, we'll be arrested. And if we try to defend ourselves, we'll be executed. See, every infraction in this nation is a crime punishable by death. And if you don't believe me, I don't necessarily advise this, but any one of you can test this out. Go down the road, get a speeding ticket for 7 or 8 miles an hour over. And you say, well, this isn't right, this isn't just. The Seventh Amendment says you can't even give me a civil fine over $20 without a trial by jury. And they say, no, you have to pay us the $127 or whatever it is in your state. And so you go to court and you say, no, I'm not going to pay this. And they say, well, if you don't, we're going to take your license. We're going to take away your permit to travel. And so you walk out and you go on down the road exercising your rights, and you start driving down the freeway and they pull you over. And they say, well, sir, in the politest of tones, or sometimes not, sir, your permit to travel is suspended. I'm going to have to take you to jail. And you say, no, I have a right to travel. And the citation that caused my permit to travel was revoked because I didn't pay a fine that was illegal in the first place. And they say no, and they pull their gun on you and point it at your head. Now they're threatening you with a deadly weapon, something you go to prison for 10, 12, 15 years. And you have a choice now. You can comply and go to a cell, or you can exercise your moral and lawful right to defend yourself against an attacker and most likely be surrounded by many more thugs, shot in the head, and put in a box. Every infraction in this nation is a crime punishable by death. Now, I don't say that that's the tactic you should take with a speeding ticket, because you can't take on every battle at once, and you can only pick one hill to die on. So let's choose wisely, because I'm in no hurry. But the point being, we need to understand law. And so we say, well, they passed a law. It's on the statutes. And so I study law, and I study statute, and I study the Constitution. But law is simple. We think we need lawyers and we need these games. And if you go into a courtroom and try and support your friend who's falsely charged with something, you will be arrested too if you don't have the certificate, the permit from government to be in the courtroom representing law, even though the Constitution says absolutely and without question you have a right as an accused to due process and to representation of your choice. But the government says no representation of your choice as long as we approve it. We're seeing the patriots from Oregon actually being denied lawyers who are actually lawyers by their own standards, because the judges don't want those lawyers involved. If you go to trial, you will be taken to trial, not with due process, guaranteed to you, but not granted by the Constitution. You will be taken to trial in the state's building in front of a jury approved by the judge and the state, in the state's room and chairs, eating the state's donuts and drinking the same state's coffee, while the state judge tells them, intimidates them, and says, you must interpret the law my way, not based on your conscience. And so out of cowardice and apathy and fear and blindness, the jury will rule against you. I've been there. I've sat in that seat. That's how it works. 92% of jury trials in this nation convict. So remember that next time you see one of these mainstream news stories saying how so-and-so for rape or for murder was committed. Because as we're seeing more and more, these people never did it. The prosecutors, they don't care if you actually did it. All they care about is the convictions, because the slaves want to feel safe. And so as safety goes down the drain, as security goes down the drain, they just keep convincing you you're safe. Imagine the irony here. They say, well, to keep you safe, you can no longer have lead in your gasoline. And here we're standing in a town where they're poisoning the people, arguably with intent, but at the very least out of sheer negligence. Imagine what would happen to you if you opened a restaurant with lead pipes. Can you imagine these things? Everything, all these things are against the law for us. But we're the serfs and they're the sovereigns. See, we think, well, people say we live in a democracy. Well, that's the last thing we want. People who are more awake say we live in a republic. But really, what we really have is a nation, an oligarchy, if you will. We have a few kings who make the final decision on everything and who say this is law, and we have a people who are slaves, and they say, well, the Second Amendment doesn't mean that, because the Supreme Court. And so I would ask them, what part of shall not be infringed is confusing to you? See, this isn't law. So what is law? Let's say we're driving down the road in Michigan and there's an empty field, not a farm field, just an empty field. And in the center of that field is an apple tree with apples on it. Who do those apples belong to? No, but it's not. It's just open land. It's not a private land. It's just there's an apple tree in the field in the wilderness. They belong to anyone. Now let's say Melissa walks up and what is your name? And you pick some of those apples, okay? And so you pick the apples and you're carrying them home. Now, who do the apples that you picked belong to? To you. Why?
Sweat of your labor.
Right. Because you took them out of nature. Now, I walk up to Melissa and I'm an authority and I have a badge. And I say, those are nice apples you have there, young lady. Give them to me or I'm going to kill you. Now, here's your taxation. Here's property tax. Here's what people like Mr. and Mrs. Brown in New Hampshire 10 years ago were standing up against. They were saying, here in their golden years, saying, no, we're not going to pay the taxes on property we own anymore. And so what did the government do? They came and they put them away for the rest of their life. What did the people, the sheriffs, the legislature of the state of New Hampshire do? Nothing. They just forgot about them. And so here they took a 65-year-old couple, happily married, and sent them off to prison somewhere, never to be heard from again. And we say, well, that's a bummer, but you should have paid your taxes. See, this isn't law. Now, on the other hand, let's say I approach Melissa and I say, those are nice apples. I'll give you some of my bread for them. And she says, okay, and we make a trade. See, now we have an equitable trade. I took the apples out of nature too, because whether by trading for the bread, which I took out of nature, or maybe I worked for the bread and got my silver coin and I bought the bread, either way, I took those apples now out of nature, just like she did by the labor of my hands. This is property. That's what makes property. This far predates the Constitution. It really goes back as far as creation itself. But political philosophers like John Locke taught us about this. And they said, well, your property is yours because you took it out of nature. And political philosophy like John Locke's second treatise is largely what our Constitution was based on in many ways. And it came long before the Constitution. And so we have two things. We have life, because my Creator gave me life. Nobody gets to take that. And no one will agree. No one will say, well, I have a right to murder you. Nobody wants to say that. And so we agree that we have life. We have property because we work with our hands and we take it out of nature. And we have liberty because in order to sustain our life, we don't have life if we don't have liberty. We can't go work. We can't take things out of nature. And so law in the civil sense comes down to this: life, liberty, and property. And it is built on the foundation. Perhaps, I think Jesus said it the most simple. He said, law is this: you love God and love your neighbor as yourself. If you love your neighbor as yourself, you cannot abuse your neighbor. It's impossible. So that's the fundamental goal. And we come to the civil sense in our Constitution and we say life, liberty, and property. And that's the foundation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men were created equal. And so we said in 1776, this week's the anniversary of that April morning in Lexington, when people stood up and they said, no, we will not comply. And that was the start of a whole new world. But it cost. Those men had to get out of their houses. They had to put their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor on the line. And for many of them, the only thing that they did not lose was their sacred honor. Because liberty comes at a price. And that price is generally not being patriotic. It's never being patriotic to the state. That price is usually standing up to your government. And so in just a few moments, we've covered the nature of law itself. And so people will email me, they see my activism and things like this, and they say, well, what about this law or what about that one? And don't get me wrong, I will study the statutes, mostly so I can know what to tell government they have to do. Because the laws, even on our books today, those aren't the ones they pay any attention to, but most of the laws in your legislature are actually rules for government, not for you. Those just are the ones they ignore. The ones they enforce are, of course, the ones for you. And so there's so many laws that are broken every time the government violates your rights. 18 U.S.C. 241 and 242 are violated every time a police officer violates your rights, every time they say you have to submit to their illegal search, every time you're stopped at a DUI checkpoint or a border checkpoint. They're committing federal crimes that actually carry hefty prison sentences. But they will never be prosecuted. When you tell your lawyer about this, like, well, what about 18 U.S.C. 241 and 2? They kind of laugh, like, yeah, that'd be nice. Because they know that you won't be held accountable. The government, rather, will not be held accountable to those things. And so if the standard of law is life, liberty, and property, it doesn't matter what the legislature says. If the legislature says something that is outside that, we must disobey it, boldly and courageously. Now, that's the simplest form, but sometimes how we define that is we remind ourselves of our rights through our constitutions. The 10 Amendments covers those rights that protect our life, liberty, and property very simply. And so we've codified those into a law for government. So rather than just arbitrarily saying life, liberty, and property, we can say these are our rights. And if you violate them, you are a criminal. Now, this goes back not only to the Founding Fathers. Alexander Hamilton in the Federalist Papers said any law that violates the Constitution is void. It is not law. And so we say, well, they passed a law. And I say, no, they didn't pass a law. What they did is lawless. They passed a statute that's illegal, and the law says we need to disobey it. But what do our clergy, what do our churches do, what do our pastors do? They say, well, Romans 13, submit to authority, obey the government.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're whores, they are for sale. And so the pastors of this nation, the clergy of the nation, I point the finger straight at them just like I do at us. They're so accountable. See, in 1776, it was them standing up and standing the line and giving their blessing to defending and loving your neighbor and standing up for liberty. Now it's them saying, so that they can protect their money and their 501c3s. Now it's them telling you, praise the government, worship the government, worship the police, obey the government, because Romans 13 says, and it says nothing of the kind.
They sold out to London Dunn.
They sold out to Satan. But yes, that was a...
Also, the UN funds a lot of your large churches. Yes, they do.
Yeah, and so money, of course, is always crawling in underneath. But at the end of the day, we don't even have to bring out all the conspiracies, which are usually legitimate. I don't usually say conspiracy theory because most of the conspiracy theories have turned out to be conspiracy fact. But I still don't get too hung up on those, because telling my neighbor or my mother-in-law or my brother-in-law who might not be very awake to what's going on, trying to convince them what they really did to John F. Kennedy or what really happened on 9/11 is not going to save my children now. But if they understand law, if they understand that the abuse of their neighbor is evil and their silence is consent, and that it's rebellion against God and rebellion against principle and treason to the principles of America. If we understand that our government is the traitors, and let's not be afraid to name names, name your politicians, interrupt your meetings of county commissioners, call them what they are. Stop giving honor to the dishonorable. Your words have power, and we have compromised our words for too long. We've compromised our words in our vote, and we've compromised our words in our voice, and we've compromised our words with our family and with our friends and our neighbors so that we don't have to deal with anything. And when we stand up and we shout the truth from the rooftops, it turns the world upside down. That's why they assassinated Lavoy Finicum, because he wasn't out there about hate or faction. The patriots in Oregon went there to love their neighbor and to say, this government is lawless, and we want to stand up to that. And that's what they did. And nothing will bring the government down on you faster than pointing the finger at them and resisting with principle and saying they are the criminals and convincing people of it. And so as we talk about that, and as we go into tactics and cover law a little bit, I want us to keep moving along here so we have time for questions and discussion. So I'm going to do a short video just with a few excerpts. Some of you have seen my videos and my activism and the things that I do, but I want to do a few levels of dissidence to show some examples in these matters. Maybe we can shut the door for just a minute here, just to dim the light a little bit. We don't really have a projection screen, so what we have is like a little 30-inch old school TV. Remember the CRT days when they weighed 400 pounds? So it's about that size. And if you need to stand or crowd around just to see this, and it's not a long video, so it won't take us long. The advantage of it being close up is once it warms up here, it'll be pretty darn bright. So let me switch this real briefly over to here so you have audio. I think I can just plug it right here and we'll be good. Good. Okay. So we'll just play this and then we'll talk about it a little. We're going to start with the most aggression, and we're going to end with the least aggression to show some different examples. Folks, my name is Gavin. I'm running for the United States Congress, and I'm running for Congress because we're losing our freedom.
We do have a representative from the Wenatchee Daily World here today. There will not be any other recording or pictures allowed other than by the news media.
76 and 60, that's the only reason I stopped you. Thank you. You should have told me that. No, I don't have to.
Yeah, maybe take us off. Take us off. Whoa, they're taking him out.
You will sit down or leave.
Will you return my daughter to the courtroom?
Sir, this is my courtroom.
No, this is our courtroom. How dare you say that this is your courtroom? This is the people's courtroom.
I'm telling you to be quiet.
I'm telling you, you are in contempt of this court. Do we need to arrest you, ma'am? Are you going to chase me, bro? Stand up! Stand up! He's not resisting. You don't have to back. You must stand and start demanding these people uphold their oath. Don't get aggressive. Keep the cameras rolling, guys. This court is a defiance. We filed the motions. We filed the paperwork.
You guys have a weapons box up there?
Not that I'm aware of. I know over in the sheriff's office, the building behind us there.
Okay. Is there a lockbox in here? No. Okay. RCW 9.41.3, I believe it is, says that there has to be a lockbox or a designated official within the building to take the weapon.
Or you can put it back in your vehicle and just show us promise across the way.
Another building doesn't count. And the reason I bring this up is because you guys have this sign here, and as I understand it, there should be a box or something here where we can secure our weapon before going in.
You shouldn't have a weapon in the courtroom to begin with.
So again,
You shouldn't have a weapon in the courthouse to begin with,
which is why you're supposed to have a lockbox.
which is why you don't bring in buildings.
See this number here? 9.41. Oh, you read this? 9.41.3. That's the RCW.
Absolutely no weapons allowed.
Have you read that RCW?
Absolutely no weapons allowed in this building whatsoever.
Sir,
911, shouldn't problem have you removed.
what's your name?
Take it back.
Okay. How are we doing, sir?
Mr. Simon.
Good.
Now, did you say you had a weapon on you?
Please release my hand.
Hang on a second. Did you say you had a weapon on you?
Please release my hand, sir.
Gentlemen,
No, I don't have a weapon. I don't have a weapon.
I'm going to check you, make sure. I'm just going
Do
to
you
check.
have probable cause to believe
Yes,
I
I
have a
do.
weapon? Okay.
You want to hand that over or set it down? I don't care. Please sit me.
Please release my
Can
hand.
you please put that down?
Can I hold it with this hand? Is that all right?
No, because I need both your hands.
All right, well, let's put it right here. Hang on,
Okay.
let me check something here. I'm not sure what probable cause you have to believe I have a
Okay,
weapon.
put both hands back.
I didn't know if you wanted the number for the.
So folks, I don't know what probable cause is, we're just gonna cooperate here.
Okay.
But the issue we have is a constitutional.
You have a weapon on you?
I'm being patted down right now.
Right, for what?
And there's no evidence whatsoever that I have a weapon.
You understand?
You have the military showing up here.
Okay.
They got a silencer on, you've got
a weapon. Let me go.
It's right where I posted it.
My light just read. Well, look, it's 3 officers because I asked for a lockbox. I have not even gone beyond the point where it says no weapons allowed. Folks, my name's Gavin. I'm running for the United States Congress. And I'm running for Congress because we're losing our freedom. And I've taken stands like this long before I was running. This kind of stuff. We got militarized police units in here coming in and groping me because they feel that I have a weapon. You can wait a second.
No, I can't.
Again,
I'm asking.
sir, you've already wasted my time.
Question.
You're not the sheriff. I want the sheriff.
Doesn't matter.
Then would you call the sheriff, or should I call 911? We need to hold government accountable.
Now, most of us weren't around in Nazi Germany, but what we see here in America these days is these checkpoints where they just stop us at the border, ask questions, and pressure us. They violate the Constitution by demanding that we answer questions, and the real question is, am I being detained? On what grounds am I being detained? The Constitution. I'm being detained. Hey, this is C. Castine. I'm being detained on grounds of the Constitution. That's a new one on me. So they're stopping us for no apparent reason. We're just traveling the highway as U.S. citizens. And here we are cruising along. This guy is so out of touch with the law that he says I'm being stopped and detained on the grounds of the Constitution.
This flag, this officer over, I want to make sure his unmarked car is legal. I'm good, sir. Good. Hey, the reason I stopped you today is because I saw this car was unmarked. Is this a registered unmarked vehicle for undercover work, or? Okay, you're not allowed to have patrol cars that are unmarked. Are you aware of that under Washington State RCW?
I'd have to look it up, but.
Yeah, you really should do that. So there's no mark, there's no indication on this car. Okay, what's your name? Canfield? Okay, Deputy Canfield. Can I see some ID?
Can you see some ID?
Yes. Yeah, I need to make sure that you need to prove you're driving an unmarked vehicle, so I need to make sure you're actually a police officer and that you have the authority to be driving this vehicle, because you seem to be kind of doing something that's clearly in violation of Washington state law. So I just want to make sure you are who you say you are, okay?
Okay.
Okay.
This is
This isn't a game, it's called law.
Okay.
Yeah. So can I see some ID and maybe license, registration, proof of insurance, sir?
No, I'm not gonna say that. I'm required by law to show you a what?
When you're involved in a stop, you are required to show that you are an officer, if requested.
A badge?
Anybody can have a patch, sir.
Okay, what about?
Is it a big deal for you to show me some ID just so I can make sure?
I can show it to you.
That'd be cool. That's all I want. I just like to make sure. Canfield GT51. Can I see?
Yeah, you can see it. You're not going to hold it in your hand.
Okay. Let me just get a close look at things.
Does that match this?
That looks legit. Yeah, I appreciate it. I do. I really do.
Driver's license?
You got a driver's license too. I appreciate it. I appreciate the cooperation. Are you stopping people in this vehicle?
Yeah.
Okay. It's completely in violation of Washington state law, and you are culpable in that, the way the law is written. So you've admitted that you are in violation of Washington state law and that you are stopping people in this vehicle. So what I'm going to encourage you to do, I'm not gonna write you up today. What I am going to encourage you to do is take this car back. I know you're smiling, but we the citizens do have a right to hold you guys accountable. If I'm in open violation of the law, I mean, I could call a sheriff out here and demand that you be written up for this, because you are in open violation of Washington state RCWs. Okay, so I just want you to talk to the sheriff about it. There's a problem with this in Soap Lake as well, and this is why I'm bringing this up lately. I really want you guys to be aware of this. I want you to follow along. Do you understand the safety concern? I mean, let's say it's 12 o'clock at night, my daughter's out driving around, and she doesn't drive yet, but you get the idea. And she gets stopped by what is supposedly a police officer, but there's no markings whatsoever. And that's one of the main reasons you should not be stopping people in a car that's unmarked, because that's when the safety concern really comes in. Somebody doesn't know if they're being stopped by a police officer. So understand that every time you stop somebody in this car, you are in violation of Washington state law, and you can't do that. So if we see you stopped in this car and have doing patrol stops in this car, we're going to have a problem because it's illegal.
Well, that's good to know.
I mean, just follow up on it and let's just get it taken care of. It doesn't have to be a big deal. And I understand that there's certain instances, as is referenced in the law, where there is exemptions, but patrol vehicles are not included in that. So, okay.
Sounds good.
All right. You be safe out there, Mr. Canfield. Take care. And that is how you stop a police officer. Thank you, guys. Okay. So let's talk about that. Okay.
Gavin, did you follow up? Did he comply?
Yeah, and I'll talk about that in just a second. Sorry. Is John Schmidt here? I just want to, just so people are aware, it seems like there's, we have one of the trolls from Oregon that showed up here, and there's photos of him outside this building. Looks like he was in the building.
Passing out fake flyers around town.
And he looks like he's passing out fake flyers around town. So apparently he came from Oregon, and who just to be aware for security purposes.
What's his name?
Well, his Facebook name is John Schmidt, and I believe this is one of the stalkers they have in Oregon. That's he has money, so he travels around the state, and he's been arrested for assault. I don't think there's an immediate danger. I just think we should be. He's never attacked any of us at other events. I just want to make sure people are aware. Okay.
That I don't believe.
Somebody said that he might have sent an accomplice instead.
And of course, they have a right to take photos of a public building and to have their opinions. We just want to be aware.
He was also putting lunches in people's vehicles. So who, I don't know whose van this is. Nope.
Who's got an LV light?
The person,
They're taking pictures of your car, putting it on the computer.
they said that they took it, asked for permission to take pictures of your
All
car.
right,
Nobody asked me.
Well, and legally, they don't have to have permission to take pictures of a car in a parking lot, but it's pretty creepy.
It is, I'm gonna go check this out.
What's the guy look like?
Yeah, maybe they'll learn something.
That's on their showings. From Utah to take
And
shit.
somebody said it might be a friend of his over here. I looked around the room, I didn't see him, but, yeah.
You got the photo?
Up here. So there's, just a minute, darling.
Actually making noise with the balloon.
So there's these two here that he took, and then he was passing out these flyers here.
Is it?
Yeah, so that's.
Wow.
I'm seeing yeah. I'm guessing on Twitter somewhere, but one of our followers pointed it out to somebody who's a friend on Facebook with me. Check. Anna, I want to go with you. I don't.
What does it say on the van?
Yeah.
Let's see the picture.
So the van, I don't know.
Our friends and neighbors will be
Oh, yeah, that's
together with us.
Yeah. So it says there's a lot of stickers, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Just a minute, Cyrus. That you gave him the thumbs up to take a photo of it.
That's why you left. That's why you left. Here you come. Here. How long did you guys find out?
Yeah.
Does it really got better or did we make it worse?
Did you see his face at all? Was it that guy there?
Oh, I would say maybe. I mean, he was just dressed in like.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm down there, and I'll ripping out signs somewhere, posting all over the.
Yes. Yeah, he posted fake.
Right, and that's what we're going to come to in part 3, which we're almost doing.
Is that why you just went outside?
We'll get started. What was your name?
Yep.
How do you pronounce it? Maher?
Okay, I better go take care. Do you want this?
No, I'm okay. I think we're fine. I don't think we need to be panicking.
Okay.
What's that?
Okay.
Right.
We're here.
It takes time to get people. People are terrified. So
Danny was lost.
Losing their stuff, losing their freedom, losing everything. And that's sometimes what happens.
He's on his way here. Awesome. And I got him turned around, got him heading this way, we took him home back in 10 minutes. He was here, it was 20 minutes. My phone's dead. I don't have his number, so he called me. You can use my phone. I'm just gonna let my phone charge for more than this. What was good?
My dad.
The guy really. Taking pictures outside. Yes, I saw that, but I didn't know that was what was going on. I sat down with my phone, I saw it, so I went out and tore them out. But that's different. There's another guy.
What color car?
His car that was taking pictures? Want me to look up a brand new vehicle? She said we should bring it in. The guy.
It's always fun to argue.
I mean, how harmless.
Just words. But knowledge is power, and people.
I know.
It's very dangerous to go against the staff.
Yeah,
But you know not fair.
that's right. There's no worth in that.
From there to the back, because I was coming in, as I was coming in. No, there were two guys.
Yeah,
This is info from Mountains.
I see it.
He's been following me from Oregon.
Yeah, he harasses people down there too at the rallies and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, where's your car over there? I just walked out with this one alone.
Cooler cars are easy.
You know who Wickley is?
Who? I'm not sure.
We're an NGO group.
Okay. Right.
I've chased so many. What they do is pay a couple of people.
Right.
And they go on these campus houses. I have gone and showed them what I knew about Agenda 21, Agenda Congress. I've had them walk right out through those booths. Get that green house,
Yeah.
and that horse just come right in.
So it looks like he's got two guys, or two people.
Oh, we don't know.
He just had a long ponytail.
I know I'm close, so he saw him taking photos.
And those basic students.
Yeah.
Goodness.
Let's see. Okay.
So, did they post pictures of it? Yeah, they posted pictures on Twitter. So this is what he was saying on Twitter earlier. And then, he posted photos of here.
They're showing the picture.
And then, posted pictures of his fake flyers.
Taking pictures of the.
Look, Cyrus, I want you to go sit down. I want to be able to keep easy track of you.
I'm proud of you.
Everything okay?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, man.
Good. Okay. Well, we'll.
So,
Thank you.
good idea.
All right, just what? You're fine. Let me know if we're report, but we'll just keep our eyes open. It's fine.
Okay.
All right.
Get outside.
Okay, we all set? Okay. Kids, calm down.
All right, I could say you could.
Okay. Hey, thanks for checking that out. We'll just keep our eyes peeled. It looks like this guy put some photos, made a flyer he's passing around town with photos of my RV and our family and stuff like that. And so we'll just keep our eyes peeled. And then he says, if you have Periscope, special treat coming up. So
What's that?
it's a video streaming service. So we'll just keep our eyes peeled. And we'll keep going here. All right. So isn't it interesting? You know, we get to experience firsthand the response of people, the hate of people against liberty. The first thing I think of when I see people that are hateful and divisive and that hate our messages, man, I want to make sure I'm not that way towards them. I want to make sure I'm not that way towards the other factions. I'm actually a little disappointed. I was hoping in Flint, you know, I'm like, I hope Black Lives Matter shows up because I want everybody to get involved. Everybody's tired of being abused. And sometimes we look at the way they do things and they do things that we don't approve of. Or sometimes they've got plants in there stirring up trouble too that isn't how most of the people feel. But I want people to show up. I want us to be united in law and teach each other law and correct each other where we're wrong, not be filled with hate. I've said in Oregon, look, if you're from Black Lives Matter, get in touch, let's talk. And so they went and found the Black Lives Matter leaders and they said, well, their flag is my nightmare. And I said, well, really, why? Because liberty is all of ours. It's our birthright. It's our children's birthright. That's the foundation. That's where we need to stand. And so if we have liberty in law, if we can teach that to our neighbor, if we can love our neighbor, and to the trolls and to the slaves, I don't hate you. I don't want your children to be slaves any more than mine, even if I think you're an idiot. Sorry, man. And so I want us to remember this, and I want to admonish us. The patriot groups are pretty bad at this. So is every other group, but we have to raise the standard. We have to love our neighbor as ourselves, even if they don't love us as themselves. Now, this doesn't, of course, mean I'm not preaching don't defend yourself. I'm not preaching, just be a pacifist. Not at all. To love your neighbor, sometimes you have to defend your neighbor. And so I don't care if it's the counter protesters across the street. I'm not going to invite the police to come abuse them either. I don't want them drugged into the courts either. I will defend them the same as I will defend you here. If we understand law, and we see in these videos, these are things that I do, and my county hates me because my county is, a lot of the people work for government, and if they don't, a lot of their families do. And so really, it has nothing to do with principle and everything to do with it challenges their status. It challenges their position. It challenges their comforts to say this government is corrupt. And the truth is, to say this whole nation, our entire government is a government of terrorists, it challenges all of us. Because if it's that bad, we're in a pickle. We really are. And that's why, for me, I say we have to have repentance. We have to have an appeal to heaven. Because while we absolutely defend our gun rights, we're not just going to jump up and fix this with guns. With the lack of principle and courage and with the anger and the hate in this nation right now, I think if we went into bloody revolution, we would have a French Revolution. And I think it's pretty clear by what the government's done to Lavoie and since then, abusing due process, torturing our patriots in jail, letting them go without food. I think it's pretty clear that they're trying to instigate something so that they can declare martial law or whatever it is that their tactic is. It seems like a pretty foolish one to me. But nonetheless, tyrants aren't always wise. But they do have practice in terrorizing and manipulating and control. We need to start controlling the conversation. We need to stop letting ourselves be divided and distracted. We need to reach out to the other groups in our communities, to the other people who are frustrated with being abused, even if they're not on our side per se. Let's find the things that they're with that we can be with them on. Doesn't mean they'll be our best friends. It means let's unite in liberty. And see, when they assassinated Lavoie, we started to see that happen. He was reaching out to everyone. They were saying, hey, Black Lives Matter should come visit us. They were saying, hey, we want to talk to the Native Americans. See, there's nothing more terrifying to a lawless government than the people united. And so all of their energy right now is not going into protecting us or our borders or our streets. It's going into doing anything and everything to keep people broken down, beat down, broke, hateful, and divided. And so that's where we're at. Now here's 3 or 4 different videos we looked at, and the first one is a fairly hostile encounter, which is usually what you get if you stand up to a judge. You will probably be arrested because the buck stops with the judges, even with your local judges. You get to the judge and they affirm the terrorism. Has anyone ever seen a judge, at least in recent times, have you ever seen a police officer or a prosecutor bring a charge up in front of a judge and have the judge not find probable cause? See, it tells you everything about these things because most of the charges are foolish and nonsense at best. And even if people violated a statute, most of the time it's such a non-issue that the judge should be saying, why are you wasting this court's time and harassing this good man? Get out of here. But these judges, the prosecutors, the officers, they're working together. They're not with us. They've chosen their path. I had a young man in his early 20s last night, and we were talking, and he's saying, well, yeah, I want to be a cop, and I'm going to officer training school. And I said, well, okay, but man, that's going to be tough, because to stand up for the Constitution, you're probably going to get thrown out and railroaded and fired. And he's like, well, yeah, that's okay. And then he keeps kind of talking, and soon it comes out that this is exactly the kind of cop they want. He's like, well, I don't really care. I don't care if they fire me. I just want a car with my name on it. I just want to be cool so I can speed and stuff. And it's like, and so this is the generation that our education system has created. In his mind, he's not out to abuse people. He's like, I'm not even going to write tickets because I don't have to. I'm just going to go have fun. As if when you get in the system, you're not going to play the game if you don't have principle to begin with. And it's the same with our politicians and our sheriffs. We talk about law. What is it? Love your neighbor as yourself. What is it in a civil constitutional sense? Life, liberty, and property affirmed by our constitutions. You can teach someone law in 30 seconds. It's very simple. And anything outside these principles, it isn't law. It's lawless. John Locke said that when a magistrate acts outside his authority, he at that point ceases to be a magistrate and can be opposed as any other man. Your judges, your police, your bureaucrats, they say, well, you have to do this or else. The only reason they get away with it is because the people cower and they won't stand up to them, because it's hard to stand and it's dangerous to stand, but the more people you have, the easier it becomes. And so here you have all of these laws coming down, and we did this in Washington. A lot of you probably heard about this. In 2014, this was shortly after I ran for Congress, and while I did get a lot done with the small amount of money I collected, I got about 10 times more votes per dollar than some of my competition. I still lost the election because the person they wanted was the nice gray-haired gentleman who just kind of, America, and the guy who has the nice little promo spots and who looks good and who's been their state representative and who lies to them. See, people don't want a representative in this nation that does things like this, because that's representing. They want somebody that will lie to them, just like they go to churches where their pastors will lie to them, because we won't repent. We want our ears to be tickled, and as such, we take part in the abuse of our neighbor. We are complicit in it, and we sell out our children into the shackles of a slave, and we elect sheriffs and officers, government officials and bureaucrats. We elect sheriffs like the one in Harney County who are in an active state of treason. They're not just bad cops, they are traitors to this country. And so is all the officers that support them and are complicit with them, which is most of them. It's most of our sheriffs. It's most of our government. And at best, you have your politicians who are supposed to be your liberty-minded politicians, and they oppose what's happened, but they're not really going to say anything because it's too controversial. See, if your congressman was representing, you wouldn't have a TSA, because the first thing that your congressman would do when elected is he'd get together with a bunch of his other congressmen, and a dozen of them would turn on their video cameras and they'd walk right through the TSA line and say, we don't stop for illegal searches. And then they would show that to the world, and pretty soon everybody would ignore the TSA. See, that's leadership. That's representation, not sitting in a padded chair and voting. Now, as a representative or a county commissioner or a congressman, sure, you need to vote constitutional, obviously. But that's actually the smallest action of where we're at. Almost every law Congress passes is illegal, because the only laws they're allowed to have are the ones in that Constitution right there. Anything outside of that, all the alphabet agencies, almost exclusively, your EPAs, and I can't tell you, every state I go to, it's like, well, we can't do this anymore because of the EPA. You know, in this state, oh, we can't have gardens here because of this. Well, these pigs, you know, we can't have those. They're illegal. These are contraband pigs. I mean, that you tolerate this of your government. We have to stop complying. Now, in Washington, we did this a little bit, but we're not enough. We need to do it more. We had them pass I-594 in Washington, that election season. I remember a month before, this was a background check law is how they sold it. Now, understand that Washington is split down the middle. Half of it is socialist, communist, and the other half is the Republican farmers who think they're great free patriots, and really they're just as big of slaves as the other side. They're just different. Because the Republicans are every bit the traitors that the Democrats are. And so this isn't about party, it's not about faction, it's about principle. And if we stand up for that, skip the party, skip the factions. You know, I know people that they spend themselves trying to work inside the Republican Party. Well, we just need to fix it, we need to get it better. It's done. We don't have a republic anymore. We don't have a United States anymore. What we need to do is get our boots dirty on the street, standing up for what's right and defending and loving our neighbor so that we can prevent violence, because we're that close to a bloody revolution. And I don't want that. Bloody revolution is the last resort of good men. And there's so many ways. Things like this, they turn the world upside down. And so I used to think, well, you know, one vote doesn't count. And it can if you have a lawful election. A lot of our elections are corrupted now. But vote anyways if you have a principled person to get behind. Then get fully behind them and support them and pitch them and get the word out and doorbell for them. But if they're just another person, oh yeah, I support the Constitution. Don't even bother. Don't even write your name behind them. Because you're just electing more cowards. We don't need cowards. We need principled statesmen. It's a very simple test. Here's the test I give in every county for people, sheriffs, whether it's their current one or electing a new one. You can write this down or you can remember it. It's pretty simple. You ask your sheriff, or really any representative, but it especially applies to the sheriff, who's supposed to be our last line of defense, who's supposed to be throwing out the feds and arresting our judges for what they're doing. So if you had a constitutional sheriff, one constitutional sheriff in this country would turn the entire nation upside down. We don't have one yet. We have a few that might be thinking about it. But the truth is, none of our sheriffs are standing up. Don't pretend with me that these sheriffs are like, yeah, I'm constitutional. I really don't approve of that. They said, I will defend. I will be the sheepdog, and I will defend liberty. So don't pretend that if they're standing up there saying Constitution and gun rights, that makes them a constitutional sheriff. And so my litmus test for a sheriff is very simple, or for any politician. But in the context of a sheriff, I say, here's my question to you. You only need one question, really, to eliminate most of the candidates. Would you, for any reason, arrest someone for the possession of any weapon? Would you, for any reason, arrest someone for the possession of any weapon?
No.
See that? Run for sheriff. There you go.
I am.
Oh, you email me. There you go. Okay, there you go. There's your guy.
And I'm willing to go and arrest the judges.
Absolutely. And that's what we need. What's your name?
Right here, Tennessee County.
What's your name?
Matt Kroll.
Well, you're on video, so you're going to have to, we'll hold you to that. But that's the thing. See, we need sheriffs with balls. Okay, and I will. I'll be here with a camera if you don't. But get this guy elected. And of course,
you're with the camera when I do.
Yeah, okay. That sounds like a plan. I'll try. Okay, so look into this guy. And of course, it's more than about guns, but this is a litmus test for whether someone understands the Constitution. It has to go the same for free speech. It has to go the same for patriots. If it's patriots or Black Lives Matter, it has to be the same. It has to be law and order. Of course, we don't loot people's private property. That's lawless. You defend the law. But I see patriots, I'll see people, I mean, look, we just had 700 protesters in Washington, D.C. a couple weeks ago sitting peacefully at the Capitol. 700 people arrested. I've sat on live streams of people when they were protesting Ferguson and things like that, and patriots are like, these people are all thugs, they should all be arrested, and they're celebrating as hundreds of people are arrested. And I was actually watching someone's live stream. They were doing nothing. They were just walking down the street. See, we can't have the faction. We defend everybody's liberty. And the reason the factions hate each other is because we look at that faction and say, ha, you got arrested. You got what you deserve. No one deserves to be in this justice system. Every single judge is complicit in this, because if you're a judge and you go along with the false charges, with the denial of due process, if you go along with requiring lawyers to be a member of the bar, if you go along with these things, you are violating your oath and you are criminalizing people. And so even people who have committed real crimes, and most of the time we don't even know because it's such a kangaroo court, but let's say there's a video of the guy robbing your car or stealing your car, right? So you know, like, okay, he did it. Even he's not getting due process. We don't have a system of due process. And so if you have people that say, I'm running for sheriff, you know, yeah, ask them other questions. But if they understand that there's no such thing as you can't have a gun because you're a felon. The felon is a joke. It used to mean something, but generally if you were a felon, you got hung. Like, it wasn't something like, oh, I'm a felon. I mean, you can be a felon now, and this goes back to what I was talking about a few minutes ago. The law that passed in Washington, and they couldn't get it through the legislature, so they put it to the vote and spent millions and millions of dollars to get the slaves to say, oh, background checks, these will make us safer. If you dug into the law, it actually made it a felony if I handed you a shotgun and said, hey, check out my new shotgun. We both become felons just for passing the gun back and forth without a background check. And so a month before this law went to the ballot, I said, listen, guys, this is why you don't vote for this. You know, here's the facts. Okay, well, lots of political groups were doing that. And then I said, but if it passes, you don't wait for your NRAs and your pandering political groups to work it out in the courts. You defy it. And I'm not going to comply, I said. And so here it is, 8 p.m. on election night, and I'm looking at the numbers. I'm like, this stupid thing's going to pass. These idiots voted for this. And so instead of sitting there complaining, before I went to bed, I made an event. And I'm a graphics guy. My trade, what I want to be out doing is my business. I take photos. I educate in photography. I make educational videos and things like that. I came to this kind of haphazardly because I was traveling around my country, and I realized my children don't have freedom. I cannot abide this. And so I started standing up and things like you see here, and one thing led to another. But when it passed, so I put out this event and I said, look, I won't comply. And I figured, you know, I might have to stand there and violate this alone and just go to jail, right? And so I wake up the next morning and 1,200 people are coming. And so, and I'm like, well, oh, maybe I should find a location for this, you know? And so we brought, and it became national news because 10,000 people said they were coming to this. And it was all talking about why? Because it wasn't another protest. It was defiance. And our sheriffs, they should be leading this defiance. Our politicians, our county commissioners, they should be leading this defiance. I just saw a news story yesterday. I don't know what state it was. I think it was out here. And there's a county commissioner, he just went to serve 10 days in jail because he encouraged the people to disobey some ridiculous law. And see, that's representing. Those are the kind of people you support. Representing is not getting up and making a nice speech and then going home and going and voting the same trash. It's not hard to tell who stands with you. And if you're saying, well, he's with us sometimes. If you're saying, well, usually I ask them, do you have a constitutional sheriff? And they're like, well, he's pretty good. I mean, well, and I'm like, it's like, no, you don't. And now I know. We don't have a constitutional sheriff. They say, well, then there's so-and-so over in such county. And I'm like, no, if you had a constitutional sheriff, I would have heard about him because he would be turning the world upside down. A constitutional sheriff would be stopping the government. They would be throwing out the federal government. He would be arresting the FBI agents. When the FBI agents came to him like they did to Jake Ryan's family in Montana and say, well, you know, you got to turn yourself in, the sheriff would have said, you leave this town, and if you cross that line again, you're going to be in jail. And then he would have turned to the world on a camera and said, we don't allow illegal federal government arrests in this county. See, that's representing, that's upholding the law. And so if we understand that first, but in absence, see, most counties I go to don't even have somebody running. I mean, most counties I go to, they're like, well, nobody ran against him. And so it's actually a rare thing to have somebody, especially who actually showed up in the room, that's running for office. That's a very good sign. But in absence of that, you can run yourself, of course, and it may be hard to get elected, but you try. And with that, you can start conversations. Even if you don't win, you can control the message. But we have to do more. So in Washington, I said, we're going to get together, we're going to defy this. And around the time 5,000 people were coming, the state kind of started getting a little worried. And so they're getting a hold of me like, well, at the Capitol, because this is where we decided to have it, you have to have a permit to put this many people at the Capitol. And so I'm talking about it with my team and some other patriots working with me. I'm like this, and we had a conference call with all the NRA and the gun groups, right? Because they realized, who's this Gavin guy and why does he have 5,000 people coming and we're not involved? And we're not heading up and our banner's not on it. And so they all get me on a conference call, and I'm with the the state heads from these different national gun groups, and they're saying, well, yeah, we just we really want this to go well for you, and we want to kind of be involved, and we want to help you, and we just want to help you get the right permits and stuff to do it, and make sure that the media doesn't think bad of us and all this stuff. And I said, I think you're not understanding something. We're here because you guys failed. You were supposed to defend our rights. You said, give us money, we're going to defend your rights. And then you sold out my children's birthright. You compromised one right to protect a little bit over here. You play the game. You don't stand boldly. And I said, so if you want to show up with us and actually defend gun rights, I really want you there. Come on over. But we're gonna keep going forward. And so I called the state, and they're trying to be diplomatic with me. They're like, well, I'm sorry, you just have to have a permit. And I'm like, well, no, you don't understand. We're not getting a permit. And they're like, well, I guess you can't have a rally then. And I'm like, I really don't think you understand. There's thousands of us coming armed. We're going to be there. You're not being given a choice. And see, this is how you talk to errant public servants. And then what I did, and this made the rally grow even more, then I would go and air their dirty laundry. I didn't play the game of, I'm just going to work it out in the background. Everything they did, I would go and repeat to the world. I'd say, here's what they're doing, and we're saying, no, we're not going to comply. We're not going to comply. And it was called the I Will Not Comply rally. We should not be getting permits on public property to gather and oppose government. It's our right. There's no such thing as a permit for your free speech. There's no such thing. And if you want to take it all the way, we've gone so far, we've let so many liberties go, right down to, the driver's license. Now, this isn't one I really protest, and we say, well, we want there to be some order, we want accountability on the road. Yeah, but we have to find a way to do it lawfully. We can't say you have to have a permit to travel, and if you don't and you resist, we'll shoot you in the head. That's not a way to bring law and order to your community. And so you have to find that balance. And sometimes the balance is hard. But we showed up, 3,000 of us on the Capitol lawn. It was December in Washington. So it's cold and it's foggy and wet. And then we showed up, a few of us, to set up, and it was a little dicey, and there were state troopers everywhere, and they kind of gave us a little trouble about where we were parking and setting up. But we'd been very clear about what was going to happen. And here's a key thing, and this is what I would say to Black Lives Matter organizers. We pushed principle. The people that were saying, yeah, let's go there and fight. We said, no. We never throw the first punch. We never fire the first shot. We will defend ourselves if need be. And so the leadership has a huge effect. You and I, those of us who are organizing, it has a huge effect if we say, no, this is the standard, this is liberty, this is law, and it's for everybody. It's not just for patriots, it's not just for Republicans, it's not just for Democrats, it's law, life, liberty, and property. And so we had this rally. We had a declaration. It's called the Declaration of Affirmation. You can look at it online, you can sign it. And it was a scroll. We actually hand scripted it. There wasn't a calligrapher on the corner like there was in 1775 and 76 era, so I had to kind of learn to do it myself, and it's a little sloppy. But here's this document on a piece of parchment, and it's about 12 feet long because it was designed for everybody to sign this document. And about 700 people signed it that day. It just stretches out signatures and signatures and signatures. And so 3,000 people showed up, and we didn't protest, we defied the law. Because it wasn't a law, it was lawless. And a few of our representatives showed up, a few, I don't know if none of the local sheriffs showed up. Sheriff Mack was there, and he stands with us sometimes. And so there was people there, and there was good patriots there, and people stood up, and the message got out, and the law was nullified. That's how you nullify a law. You simply defy it. And people say, well, no, Gavin, you didn't succeed. The law's still in the books. The law hasn't been enforced since. Now, of course, you have your complicit gun shops who are afraid to stand up, and they still comply with the game. But we have an active black market gun trade in Washington. I mean, what you do is you encourage each other to sell guns. And like, if someone's trying to sell you a gun and they say, well, we need to get the background checks, you're like, excuse me? Excuse me, what? And you expect it if you go into a gun store that they're going to play the game. But this is actively ignored. And this is a felony in the state of Washington. But when the people gather and defy, it becomes nullified. Now, this is especially effective when a law has just passed. That's the time to strike hard. But see, your NRAs and your gun groups, not one of the national gun groups showed up at the largest felony civil disobedience in American history. Not one of them was there because they were busy worrying about what the news media was going to think. And we did exactly what I told them by God's grace. And at the end of it, it was shocking. At the end of it, because I was sweating. I'm like, what if I start the next revolution? I don't want that on my shoulders. And so at the end of it, 3,000 people, there was not so much as a Kleenex on the ground when everybody dispersed. See, that's how you set an example of principle and boldness. So you don't just wave signs, you be defiant, you be bold. And sometimes it means you disrupt. Sometimes it means you throw the tea off of the ship.
Civil disobedience.
And we have to get to that. And as we come into we're already into part 3, really. So we've got repentance, we've got real law, and then we're bringing that together with action. And that's what we see. Sometimes it's in a group. It's always better to be in a group. But I have this problem that when I get in a group, usually they spend more time debating about what they're going to do than actually doing anything. And so usually I'm a bit of a maverick. I just say, okay, yeah, that's cool, guys. All right, I'm out of here. I got to go. And I just go do it. And then they're mad at me because I did it without them or because I did it in a way they didn't like. And the media is having a field day. And I'm like, you don't get it. I love it that the media is having a field day. They're carrying the message I wanted to put out there. See, our political panders, they're always saying, well, what will the media think? We got to be careful. Now, I'm always careful. We should be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. I'm always careful to the best of my ability of the words that come out of my mouth. But I'm not afraid of the media hating me. I will look over in the corner and I'll see a media guy writing and I'll say something that is not even really that relevant, but I know it's relevant to the overall conversation and they'll repeat it. So I'll say, I did this when I was running for Congress. It's fun. You have to watch their pen start scribbling. I'll be up there and I'll be saying, your gun rights are non-negotiable. And if you want a tank in your yard, I want to live next door to you because it'll be the safest house on the block. And so they're scribbling away. And of course, that's the line that's in the newspaper because it's not radical if it's repeated enough. The reason liberty has become radical, liberty is not the fringe, it's the foundation. The reason it's become radical is because we do not shout it from the rooftops. Liberty's not something that should be hidden away on dusty shelves. We should be holding it up in front of us every single day of our lives, and we should be teaching it to our children and to our grandchildren. And if we are not, we have failed our posterity. We do not need to hide it. We do not need to be afraid of the debate or the dissent in our family. To unite in liberty, we must divide with tyranny and wickedness and evil and stand boldly, loving our neighbor, but also opposing them when they abuse theirs.
Give me liberty or give me death.
Bravo. We need tenacity. And if that's you, then you need to run for office. If you think that's not your role, then find somebody that will. But I'm talking about more than voting, because most of the time we go to these events and they're like, now go vote red. You know, and that's not the topic here. They assassinated Lavoie. Our patriots are in prison, and dang it, I want them out. I'm sick of this. I'm sick of the abuse. I'm sick of the lawlessness. And the best I got is my voice. It's my opinion. That if we start giving it the best we got, if we start repenting and standing up and loving our neighbor, even though it's not enough, God will fill in the rest. I don't have the solution to get our patriots out of jail, and most of the lawyers don't either. I certainly don't think it's probably going to be effectively happening through the courts, but one way or the other, they're going to get out. One way or the other, there's going to be accountability. We need to be peacemakers by defending peace. And I mean this in every sense. It starts here in this community. I mean, this community of all places, to tolerate this. And they say, well, you know, we have a couple people that are doing something about it. Why is your mayor and your city council, why are they tolerated? Why are they in office anymore in a town like Flint? Why is your sheriffs who won't stand up, why are they tolerated? This isn't a threat to them. It's a threat to their position. They should be removed from office and given the due process that they have denied to us. And this is key. No matter how much they abuse us, we never become the lynch mob. Because when we become the lynch mob, we become them. And I will never be them. I refuse to be them, and that's why principle has to be first. But we have to start standing up. We have to start being defiant, whether it's alone with a camera on the street. And speaking of tactics, since we're at that phase, you always have the camera on. People think, well, Gavin just goes out and looks for these things. I don't enjoy these things. They make me sick. I don't enjoy the adrenaline wearing me down. And I don't want to be out doing these things every day. And honestly, it just feels like they fall right in front of me and I just turn the camera on. I don't go out hunting for it. And what I hate the most is a planned activism event. You know, and sometimes you need those. You want to rally people together. But those ones tear me up the most. Those are the hardest because you have to anticipate and think about them. Make sure you're doing it all right, and you don't always do it all right. When they just drop right in front of you and you say, oh, I'm going to stop and film this police officer, half the time it goes nowhere, and occasionally they come over and they start bullying you. And I've had that happen plenty of times, and then you assert yourself. And so this is key to the individual activist, but also to the group. Be bold, be defiant, and be principled. And we saw this in this video. You know, the officer says to me, all right, now I need to do this. And I say, no, that's not what we're doing. And it's not because I'm rude. We need to quit worrying about this rudeness nonsense. And that's what the play along to get along folks are always telling you. Oh, that's rude. You're disruptive. See, people said to me, Gavin, you're an idiot for raising the lockbox issue. You should have written a letter. And then somebody else is like, well, wait a minute. I've been writing letters for 10 years because they've been ignoring the law there for 10 years. And so what I do is I see something that doesn't make sense and I just look it up. I mean, I didn't know the law when I first walked into the courthouse. I walked in and I'm like, wait a minute. Didn't somebody tell me there's supposed to be a lockbox for our guns in here instead of this big sign that acts like I'm a criminal for possessing a gun? And so I walked back out and I looked up my phone. I'm like, law for courthouses, guns. And this locking up and I'm like, hey, wait a minute. There's supposed to be a lockbox in here. It's not like I'd spent years studying this. I walk in, I'm like, are you aware of RCW ... It's written right here. This is the law. And so there's sign that says absolutely no weapons allowed. It has nothing to do with what the law says. That's not what the law says. It was perfectly legal to have a gun in that space. And so I don't know how it is in this state, of course, depending on your activism, but it's not about the lockbox. It's not about the unmarked cars. Those are a symptom of lawlessness. It's about a government that honors law and respects and defends the people. That's the foundation. And we don't have that anymore. And that's why we're where we are. That's why Lavoie is killed, and because we don't show up. You know, the factions and the patriot groups, we have these groups that are equipped, that have, for years have been telling us, we're going to stand, support us, and when the day comes, we'll be there. Were they in Oregon? They didn't show up. Now, don't get me wrong, we won't all point the finger at all of us, but some of us have certain roles and certain things, and some of us have organized groups that we can show up in mass. Because me going down to the checkpoint in Oregon alone and saying, I want the final 4 out, that would have just got me arrested. I can't do everything by myself, and neither can you. Some things you can do on your own, in particular conversational things. It's not rocket science. Anybody can pick up a camera and point it at themselves and say, I'm going to limit myself to 5 minutes, and I'm going to say 1, 2, 3. I'm going to open, middle, close, and I'm going to explain what just happened here and why. I use every video. You might want to plug this in. It's getting a little low if you want it to keep streaming.
Oh, I don't have the power thing.
Okay, well, it is what it is, I guess. So you have your confidence, your assertiveness, your boldness, your knowledge of the fundamental law. You don't have to know all your legislature's laws inside and out. If you understand the principles of law, you know the right and wrong of it. And then you can stand up for that. But a tactic for us is you always turn the camera on. See, if I had got elected to Congress, I was going to do with the TSA what I talked about. I was going to go through with the camera running. I was going to make the TSA arrest me on camera and tackle me or whatever it is they do, and then say, you realize I'm a congressman, right, and you can't arrest me because Congress is in session. I mean, and so I would have controlled the conversation. We should be turning the world upside down with our stands and with our positions. We should be interfering. We need to start clogging up the gears of lawlessness. We do it in a principled way. We don't abuse our fellow man, but there's nothing in moral principle or in law that says we should not interfere with lawless officials. And this can mean your courts. Be careful about that because you do tend to get arrested for that. But this can mean, listen, we say, I have a grievance. And so we ask our county commissioners, can I have 3 minutes to speak? And they're like, yeah, sign here and agree to this and do this. Now, imagine the difference in impact if 3 of you walk into your county commissioners meeting in the middle and you say, stop. Your lawlessness will not be tolerated, and you will address this issue, or we, the people, will address it for you, and you turn on your heels and walk out. And you have a camera, and as you're walking out, you're saying, these people are criminals, and we're doing this because we don't need their permission. Now, how much effect would that have on the public conversation, as well as on your county commissioners, versus them completely ignoring you for 3 minutes while you make a prepared speech? We're compromising our voice. Start interfering with lawless government. Now, if you have a lawful sheriff, if you have lawful public officials, get them to do it with you. Because if you have a lawful sheriff, he goes into the county commissioners meeting and he controls the conversation. He can say, oh, I'm the sheriff. If you guys pass this law, I'm going to arrest you if you try to enforce it. Or he can just say, I won't enforce this law. You know, he can go in and monitor his judges. And when the judge violates due process, he doesn't have to interact with the judge. He simply walks up and arrests the judge. You're under arrest for X, Y, and Z. Now, I have no doubt your state will come after you if you do these things. But if one sheriff stands up and says, I'm here to defend people's rights, if the sheriff did it and said, who stands with me, people would flock from all over the country. If the sheriff said, we're arresting the federal agents on this day, show up, I need a militia. Now, of course, these are things we want to be careful about. We don't want bloodshed, but the best way to avoid bloodshed is 3,000 people with guns. Yeah. You find me an incident in history, American history, or probably most other histories, where you had more than even 200 people who were armed, where the government came in and did a mass arrest or a mass violence. They don't do it. They do it to unarmed people. They wouldn't have arrested those 700 people in Washington, D.C. if half of them had been armed. But oh, guess what? It's a felony to have a gun there, too, because we've tolerated lawlessness at every turn. Now, on the other hand, if those people had gotten together outside of Washington, D.C. for a protest, 3,000 of them been armed, and then the leadership had said, with their sheriff at the head, even better yet, now we're going to march with our guns down Constitution Avenue, you would have heard a whole different story. Because the government is absolutely terrified of unarmed people. And so the last thing I want is just to have to use guns in that context. But if the people are armed and courageous and bold and they're not compromising, everything changes. And so we can disrupt, we can turn the world upside down. One person can turn the world upside down. And assert yourself, be bold. It's not an accident that when I go and deal with an encounter that I put that suit jacket on. See, I'm commanding them to obey me. And people say, well, Gavin, if you were black in Flint, you'd never get away with this. Well, I'm not saying I'm going to go out and look for it today, but what I'm saying is, gosh, guys, maybe if you knew your rights, maybe if you were confident, if you looked them in the eye, if you got a little commanding, maybe if your pants weren't hanging halfway down, they would look at you differently, because these guys are trained to follow orders. We're supposed to have a government that follows the people's orders. What it's really come to is they follow bureaucrats above them. But it's still, they train police to tell you what to do. They do not train them to have you tell them what to do. And so one of the reasons, I think God protects me in spite of myself. But in a tactical sense, the way that I interact with police, it's not accidental. It's not because I'm trying to be rude. If they are hostile with me, I will match their hostility with assertiveness. I won't be rude, but I'll control the conversation. If I interact with a public official, they do not get to control the conversation. It's mine. It belongs to my camera and those people watching. And that's why at the end of every video, I turn it around and I say, okay, here's what happened. Here's what the big picture is about. It's about liberty. Educate people. Use that as a method. See, I don't just want to take on my local government, although 2 weeks later, there was a lockbox in the courthouse. And a month later, the sign was gone and replaced with a proper one. And so after 20 years, people say, well, you're an idiot. That doesn't work. Oh, well, so then, but every time I do something, it's always the same. You're just seeking your 15 minutes of fame and you're an idiot. They rail on me. They send me letters telling me to shoot myself in the head. They mock my family. And most of my immediate family, they stand with me. So the Symes in Grant County are notorious. They are hated, but not by everybody. There is support there, because the truth is the tyrants are a minority. But a lot of people are confused and afraid and scared. And so for the tyrants, we have to stand boldly up to them. But to the others, let's bring them over. It's like whoever the idiots are out taking photos here, of course, we can't allow them to abuse our families. And they may be genuinely working for the enemy, or they might just be complete slaves that are clueless and they have the money to harass people. And if it's those, I want them to learn. I want them to come around. I want us to unite in liberty. And this is the case with most people, even from other factions. They just want to be free. They want their friends to stop being locked away in prisons. They want their lives to stop being destroyed. They want their children to stop being taken away from them. You know, don't even get me started on CPS and child services and things like that. These people are terrorists. The sheriff should be arresting them. And so we can do that boldness. First of all, and this is a flat out tactic. Whenever you have an encounter with a public official, pull out your camera. Okay? I was in Illinois, couple days ago, speaking in Rockford. And I don't really have any rush to go back to that place. I mean, Illinois is like, wow. It's like you have to pay to get off the interstate. I'm like, oh, wait, I'm in prison on the interstate. I get punished if I don't pay to leave the interstate. And finally I just would start getting to the toll booths, and I'd be like, man, guys, you charge the most and your roads are the crappiest. You need to fire some people. And then the guys at the booth are just kind of like, you know. But I just, I'm like, hey, plant the seeds. Make it normal to speak of liberty and to call people out on it. It doesn't mean you're hostile. It doesn't mean you're rude. Sometimes you might be rude in their eyes, but I don't care if they think I'm rude. I answer not to a board, not to the liberty movement,